And we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Pop Culture Cosmos, Lakers Fast Break, Game Source, and Inside Sports Fantasy Football. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great programs. And if you can, please give us that 5-star review on whatever platform that you can able to be voting on. So you can go ahead and give us that review. It really helps us out. And also allows basketball fans from all over to check us out right here at the Lakers Fast Break. And if you do, we truly appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, please, you can always send it to us at Lakers Fast Break on Twitter or send us an email, lakersfastbreak@yahoo.com. Well, it's been a great month of April. Just so much draft coverage right here on the NBA Lakers Fast Break. I'm so glad I made the call. I felt like doing something more, expanding my reach as far as the shows are concerned, just focusing on one certain aspect of the NBA, wanted to focus on some others along with what we do as far as updating you on what's going on with the Lakers. And I'm so glad I've gotten to talk to the Barlows from the NBA Draft Junkies. I'm so glad I got to talk to Stone Hansen, who you heard recently as well. From draftside.com. And I'm also glad to speak to my next guest. He's been a tremendous guest each and every time he's been on the show, and also has had to deal with my picks for 2 rounds on the NBA mock draft as well. It's a good man indeed. You want to go ahead and check out his work on the Stepien.com, and also he works for a lot of great stuff going on at Perspective Insight. It's Michael Visenberg. And Michael, thanks for stopping back on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great time, and there's nothing wrong with your picks, Joe.
Sure.
Nothing wrong at all.
You can actually see it on our YouTube page when you go to the video, especially the first round. The looks that were made by these guys, it says it all. It's okay.
It was a good time.
It was a great time indeed. The second round, though, I feel much better about it because I know I stole a couple of picks from Rafael. Yeah. So it's hard. I think it's harder the second round, personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so few players land in the second round, like as far as making a career or like staying on a roster. So yeah, it's definitely pretty tough to pick like those few guys. If you're in a first rounder, you probably are going to have like at least a few chances to stay around, and a lot more of those guys hit.
I feel like we were just all like having a set of darts, and we were like throwing it at dartboard right there and just seeing what sticks.
You, sir, just made a fantastic metaphor for the NBA draft in general.
Pretty much is the case. Speaking of the NBA draft, it's actually now being widely reported that the NBA draft, as we expected, and I think you and I talked about this briefly the first time we met, as far as the NBA most likely would not be taking place in June. And I think that's something you and I both expected. I think it is being moved back now to either August or September, which is giving a sign that the NBA is really going to come back in some sort of fashion as far as finishing a season, whether they're going to be playing at Disney World, Bahamas, or in Las Vegas. My money's still on Las Vegas because just the number of games you could play simultaneously would really just, it would work out a lot better. I'm not sure how many on the Disney World Sports Complex, but again, that's up for speculation. I think that August and September is a good timeline for an NBA draft because maybe with a little bit of rookie league play beforehand, you probably get a season coming up maybe in November-ish, maybe December, starting off the new season. So that's a good time frame for also a lot of these teams to recover and be able to go ahead and plan out for the draft. What are your thoughts about the NBA draft being moved to a possible August or September start date?
I think it's just something you have to do right now. I think even with the current landscape, even if you cancel the season, then it is just something that is like a must at this point. And can you unmute? Because I just feel like I'm not talking to you.
Oh, no worries. I just don't want to be breathing into my own mic. So
no, it's all good. I feel like
I apologize.
I'm one way or the other. Yeah, it just kind of threw me off.
Okay.
But yeah, I just think it's something you have to do at this point, and it's going to be like just something where it has to be as soon as the season's over, and then you just have to kind of figure out where we go from here. But at the same time, I just think that it's something you have to do, and teams have to have an ability to evaluate these guys and kind of have more of a some eyes on them, and just more of a process.
It is more of a process, and that's one of the things that you guys have a chance to do, you and the Barlows and Stone Hansen. But there's also scouting teams. I mean, you're familiar with with the size of these teams as far as from a scouting perspective. And on a normal given NBA year, how many people are working for an NBA team scouting department? Maybe 10, 20? Give a kind of perspective for that for everybody out there.
I think it really depends. I know there aren't tons of guys that actually go on the road, but then you'll have, video people working and just other executives and people in the fold, and then, possibly consultants. So yeah, there's definitely a team that goes into it. And right now, I think a lot of NBA teams are focusing on free agency in the draft when they have all this downtime.
Okay. So, I mean, like you said, there's a whole bunch of video staff. I mean, those video coordinators who set up everything for the teams as far as running plays or looking at defenses, they're also looking at those, potential first and second round candidates and lining those videos up for the scouting staff. So that's truly important what they do. And of course, like you said, the scouting staff, whether they're home based or they're going out to all different points of the world, it's quite a job to go ahead and take a look and see who you're going to go ahead and invest potentially millions of dollars in, and it's something that it needs to be taken seriously by all these NBA teams.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why they try and get as much intel and background information on all these players, and then just watch tons of video, watch tons of games of guys that you get an idea of who you like in the draft. And then you just try and do as much background research on them as possible. And I think a lot of draft people right now are kind of getting more into that, and maybe even looking at players they wouldn't have had a chance to look at with games going on. And there's really a chance to kind of go back over quite a bit at this point.
There is quite a bit to go over right now as far as previous footage and whatnot, and there's still no timetable or even been announcement though of a NBA combine or anything of that nature, and that still to me is kind of worrisome because you want to get the full measurements of these kids. I think you're not going to see them in action very much. I don't think you're going to be able to see that this year or anything like that. But I'd still like to see the point where either the medicals that are given out to some teams, depending on which agents want to go where, or the measurements, most likely, I think, is what everybody seems to go ahead and focus on, and also the how high do they jump, what's their vertical, what's their speed, things of that nature. Those things are I think are still important to the league, and I'm not sure if there's going to be a combine where you're going to get exact measurements and those type of numbers for these players. I'm hoping there will be, but you haven't heard anything yet on that, have you?
I don't think there's been anything definite on there being a combine at this point, but I'm almost certain the Chicago combine will be canceled, but that just kind of goes without saying. But I think that they're talking about possibly doing remote combines or having certain number of people at a time. I doubt they would do games, but maybe agencies and all these different people will do something to kind of release measurements or athleticism numbers and things along those lines. You just kind of wonder if players are, because I think that as soon as the season ends, players usually train for the combine. Mm-hmm. And you kind of make sure the best way to do a four-way agility, lane agility and stuff like that, and work on your vertical, work on your sprint. I'm wondering how that would really work. But at the same time, I think teams will get measurements one way or another. Just the public might not get them. Being pretty much a part of the public, I love getting those combine measurements and getting those athleticism results. Like, just there's something to kind of use as like a gauge. And, like, can Andre Drummond really not touch 12 feet? Like, you get like kind of around there. And
sometimes it's a difference when you have two players that are around the same level in your evaluation. And sometimes those measurements, if one is has a longer reach, has a higher vertical, that can make all the difference for you guys.
Oh yeah. Well, probably not all the difference, but it certainly is a factor. And when you notice, like, I'll give the last. Let's look at the Last Dance. You have the Bulls. They weren't necessarily like the tallest guys at their position. Like, obviously, Michael Jordan was taller than the average shooting guard. Scottie Pippen was taller than the average small forward. And then Dennis Rodman is maybe a little shorter than the average power forward. But they all had like +5, 6, 8 wingspans. Like, Dennis Rodman was definitely long. Scottie Pippen was crazy long. And then Michael Jordan had like, I think somewhere in the 6'10 to 6'11 wingspan range. So, and then you look at most like great players, and they're usually pretty long. So having a good basketball body is definitely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, I'm talking to Michael Visenberg from the Stepien.com. You got to check out his work there, and also Perspective Insight. I wanted to ask you real quick about these players. They're making life-changing decisions on many occasions. They're testing the waters. Some are not getting an agent. Some are, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. These players who are most likely testing waters, and of those that have already gotten an agent. I mean, some of them you just see and they declare for the NBA draft, and they're just testing the waters, and you think, good move, just to get an evaluation from teams where they stand. They haven't gotten an agent. They've been smart about it because they're not sure where they stand. They see those NBA mock drafts that have been put out by you, Stone, the Barlows, and whoever that's out there, and they see that, okay, maybe their fall here, that's not as high as that they would like. So they gauge with the NBA teams, and then NBA teams give them some feedback. And so, they're going, maybe isn't the right thing for me. I'll head back to college. But then there are those who right away, I don't know whether it's people in their ear or what have you, they'll just go ahead, they declare, and boom, they've got an agent right away. So I want to hear your thoughts on the ones for this year's draft, because we've got a lot of people, I think partly because of the pandemic, that have declared for the NBA draft. I want to hear your thoughts on players that maybe are not making the right choice, that have already committed and already put 2 feet into those draft waters.
Yeah, I'm not like, I have a different kind of way of looking at it as well. Like, I think that, well, for the most part, you have 205 guys that declared. You are probably going to see at least half of those players go back to school, or like just take their names out if they're European. But I'm not sure it's like a terrible option for everybody. And some of them, maybe it's just a good option to go and make money playing basketball, like, or doing something else, even if they don't get drafted into the NBA. Like, you figure of these 205 players, they say only 60 get drafted. Well, that's not even necessarily true, because usually like 12 to 15 seniors will get drafted. So probably only like 45 to 48 are going to get drafted. Mm-hmm. But some of them, maybe it's a good option for them to, like, they're just as high as they're going to get. As nice as it is to have that education, if you plan to play basketball for a few years, like, you might as well strike while the iron's hot. And so, yeah, there are going to be just tons of guys who I feel are testing the waters now, and then some who just have decided the college isn't for them anymore. And yeah, that's just kind of the way it works. As far as somebody who's hired an agent or anything like that, like, I I kind of don't really want to like throw anybody under the bus and like for a decision that is like definitely theirs. And like I Jeff Goodman had an article that just came out on Watch Stadium where he basically talked to NBA executives and like gives his kind of breakdown on that. And maybe it's something that, I'm sure it's something that players will glance over. And then I like the ultimate hope is that whatever information they get from the, early entry committee, like whatever reports they get there are tell them what they need to work on and kind of give them an idea of what their range is. And then they can make the decision from there. Like last year, Peyton Pritchard entered. He did a few workouts for teams. That's the major difference this year. You're not going to be able to do that. So, yeah, I think once June 3rd rolls around, we're going to see like a significant drop off of number of players who had declared early. And the way the current system's set up, I think it's good to just get as much information as possible. And it kind of almost encourages guys to enter their name into the draft at this point. But I think a lot of them end up going back to school.
Well, I don't blame you in the case of Peyton Pritchard. It certainly worked out well for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just tremendous year at Oregon. And I don't think he falls or rises much than what he was at this point last year. He's going to be probably somewhere in the second round. I mean, I picked him. So,
well, last year, like he had averaged like 12.9 points a game. He had a great end to the season, but if he had declared, I don't think he gets drafted. And then this year he's going to. I think I like where you picked him. So yeah, he would have been my favorite pick regardless, but he was definitely my favorite pick in the draft.
Well, I had a feeling you were going to be picking him very soon if I didn't. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I was making sure Peyton was going to be off the board.
There you go.
Because he had a fantastic year. And a lot of people compare him to like TJ McConnell. And it just seems like every time, because I've got to see Peyton since he was, the first time I saw him he was a high school sophomore and played at the Nike Hoop Summit. And went up against Tyus Jones, who was the top point guard in his class at the time, or at least among the top point guards. And when he started that game, he was like the best player on the floor. Like he just hit a few shots, made some great passes, and people were like, "Who is this kid?" And then he came back the next year, and then by his senior year, he was on Team USA, and I got to see him play at a few other places as well. And it just seems like he always kind of worked his way up to whatever the competition was, never really backed down, was always able to make shots. He's a great ball handler. So, yeah, this year he was fantastic. And, like, the Ducks would have been a mediocre team without him. And Absolutely. They were one of the best teams in the nation with him.
Yeah, he definitely deserved all the accolades, had a great season. I expect him to be an NBA contributor, someone off the bench, like you said, TJ McConnell in that framework, maybe even like what we talked about here on the Lakers with Alex Caruso, just that type of individual coming off the bench that can do a little bit of everything for you. I think that's what he can ultimately end up being.
Yeah, that's a hope.
Let's hope indeed for the Ducks fans out there. It's I think it'll work out. One of the things I wanted to ask you, so while I'm here and while I've got you here, is, these mock drafts are all over the place. And, we've seen so many and I've talked about so many. And when it comes to these mock drafts, they're just, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, we have more time to go ahead and read them. Obviously, there's more time to construct them. But as long as they're being updated, and I see this from several outlets, there's players that are just – they're rising a lot and they're falling a lot. And my question to you is, because this is kind of strange, is when there's no action being played, when there's no combines out there, how are these players rising and falling in these projections, sometimes in a dramatical case?
I think that's what a mock draft kind of is. Like the simple answer is that like a mock draft, and even like these high school rankings, like I think sometimes they'll kind of drop a guy down just to have him rise up again. And that's just kind of what a lot of these rankings are. But what a possible explanation would be that you're just getting as much information as you have access to. And once you get more information, once you're able to see these guys a little bit more, maybe you weren't watching that guy, or maybe you watched him a little bit more and you just changed your opinion. So that I think a lot of it has to do with the intel you get and just things along those lines, and just watching more film. You're only, if you're one person and you're making a mock draft, you're only able to watch so much, and you need to sometimes rely on other people's opinions. I'm just saying, for like major draft sites, you need to rely on your intel, and I think those are kind of the gauges that people use to move people up and down their board. So I think even with games not being played, you're always getting new information, and these guys are likely getting this new information and making the changes based on that.
Now, is there anybody that has made a dramatic rise since the beginning of the year for you as a player that's headed to the 2020 draft? Because we're talking about a draft that is, and it's as everybody has said this out there, it's not eye-opening by any stretch of the imagination. It's one of those it's not an on year, it's an off year, I'd probably say is probably the best way to say it. It's a year that you're going to find a lot of good players, but nobody stands out right now. But is there anyone that is moved up in your eyes within the recent months that you feel is taking the next step as far as evaluation is concerned?
Yeah, and a great point using the word evaluation, because sometimes you evaluate a player and you may be off. And you see a guy in high school and you think he can only do these kind of things, and then he gets that next level and you're like, wow, he can do a little bit more. And vice versa. Like, you see a player, you think he'll translate this way, and maybe he has a lot more to work on. And one of the players who did that and moved up for me definitely is Onyeka Okongwu. Started the year, I'd seen him like a bit at Chino Hills. He didn't get the McDonald's All-American nomination. It actually, a guy who came in with him that was maybe a little more, or a little higher in the rankings and a little more talked about, was Isaiah Mobley, whose brother Evan is one of the top players in this upcoming high school class.
Headed to USC.
Headed to USC as well. Their father is an assistant coach there. But
funny how that is.
Yeah. And then with Onyeka, you have all these guys this year, and you just want as few variables as possible, like unknown variables as possible. And Onyeka like just ticks so many boxes, because you know what he's going to bring. You know that he's going to, he's a really smart defender. He'll protect the rim. He's great around the basket, and he's super explosive. And he moves his feet well, so he has versatility as a defender. He didn't shoot terribly from the free throw line. So these are all things that definitely worked in his favor to move him up draft boards. And, I think most people are – I don't even know if there was like a major site that really had him like as a one and done, or like as like a potential lottery pick before the year. There were some people that did. But now he's like absolutely a top 10, possibly even top 5 pick.
Absolutely. He's grown by leaps and bounds. I did get a chance to see him in Pac-12 action, even against your Ducks.
Yeah.
And he has performed very well. He's someone that we've talked about as not having the highest of ceilings, but he's going to reach that max more likely than many of these players, because the drive and the motor that he has. Because, if you can describe what this is, I think it's pretty apparent to see. But, when you have a high motor, you're going to try and get the maximum out of whatever abilities that you have.
Yeah. He plays with great energy. I was at the game he played against Oregon, and for whatever reason, they weren't getting him the ball near the end of the game. And Oregon ended up winning that game in overtime. But he was an absolute force and had some dominant stretches over that game. Great possibility as like a lob finisher, and then just he moves really, really well. And Oregon had trouble with a lot of big men this year, and he was definitely one of them.
He seems to be like the player that may not be run off the floor quite as bit. Once he gets his feet wet, that experience in the NBA, because like you said, he moves his feet on defense. He has the ability to guard smaller players and larger players because of his size and be able to stay on the floor in a defensive fashion. So he may be on the floor at the crucial times that you need him, as opposed to a big who, at the first sight of a 3-guard setup has to go on the bench because he just can't guard anyone.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. Like that's I think what makes him such an enticing prospect as a center would be his ability to possibly, guard multiple positions once you get to the playoffs, and not have to be just taken completely out of the equation against a small ball team.
So we've talked about a player that can rise up and that has risen up in a lot of people's mock drafts. There's always got to be one that falls. Is there anybody right now that maybe, and this could change, people can see different things in this person, but as of right now, as we're talking, is there anybody that's might have fallen a little bit in the eyes of scouts and NBA personnel and draft experts such as yourself that, just for right now? I mean, like I said, there's still a long way to go. Yeah. But for right now is maybe on the outside looking in as far as a little bit down on what they were once before.
I'll talk about 2 guys, and they both went to the same school. And I feel like Jaden McDaniels and Isaiah Stewart both had some rough spots this year.
Had a feeling you would say that.
Yeah. Well, so Washington was – I just thought they were a really talented team who were very tough to watch. And I thought Isaiah actually played really well. And, I was at the game they played against Gonzaga and the game against Oregon. And Isaiah played well in both of those. Against Oregon, he played really well for the most part, and then just kind of faded off near the end. But he certainly stacked the box score. I think he was number 2 in the RSCI final rankings, which is just a combination of a bunch of high school rankings. And always a player that I like. He was one of my favorite guys in this high school class. I just loved his energy. 7'4" wingspan. But people are just concerned kind of about his where you're saying that Onyeka has the ability to guard multiple positions. Isaiah is just kind of like a big man, guarding a 5, and is a little undersized by NBA proportions. Doesn't move his feet extraordinarily well. Doesn't really very low steal rate, and kind of has problems with lift. So he's not like a great shot blocking threat as well. So yeah, those have just been whereas I remember Raphael when he took him, which I think Isaiah is, well, he's going to be drafted just based on everything that happened before and based on the fact that he did stuff the stat sheet. But there are absolute concerns about his ability to defend in the NBA. And then I think part of it was the way Washington played him, but he was really post reliant, and he did well in the post, but that's just not the way the current NBA is set up. And then you wonder if, going up against bigger players, if he'll have that same efficiency. But I think he's tough, and he has amazing strength. Regardless, you just kind of wonder if he can keep up with that pace. In the term of Jaden McDaniels, it's probably the opposite, where he has some defensive acumen, he has flashes of, some ball handling. He can every once in a while, like, string a few shots together, even make a few shots off the bounce. It definitely takes a lot of them. But I think he has issues with using like his functional strength. He just, when you see him in person, like, he has a very narrow frame. And then there were just all these times where he just kind of floated through games. It seemed like he was kind of in the doghouse near the end of the year, was getting a lot less playing time. So, concerns as far as that. And then just in terms of efficiency, like, his shot selection definitely was very troublesome at times. And then in terms of effort on defense, like, you like the way that he moves his feet, and he has potential there. So that's probably why he's going to go higher than Isaiah in the actual draft.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are certainly some concerns as far as, like, if he's going to put it all together. And those are two guys I think who were considered like lottery picks by almost every major site going into the year, and now are likely, like, mid to late first rounders.
Well, in the case of Isaiah Stewart, he fell down to the second round, I believe.
Yeah.
And as Rafael Barlow said at the time when he drafted, I'm paraphrasing him, but it's like a relic of a decade gone by. Like, if this was 2004, he would be right there in the top 3. But this is 2020, so he falls quite a bit further than that.
Yeah. Just because you're worried about his ability to defend at the NBA level.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about right now. It's just so funny how the league has changed and evolved, and players we were once looking at in awe are now like, yuck.
Well, and also, like, I think it's just analytics as well, because you see his counting stats look really good, but then you look a little bit further and you see some potential issues there.
Absolutely, it's all about the analytics these days, the data. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but the numbers don't lie.
It's a part of it.
May not tell the whole story, but they certainly don't lie.
And then Washington was like a straight up bad team, and you had these two guys who are like probable first round picks, or at least like NBA level players, and obviously there were issues beyond just Isaiah and Jaden, but they started off the season with a win over one of the best teams in the NCAA, where it was the first game. Crazy things are going to happen. I heard like possible jet lag from Baylor as well. But yeah, they certainly were a bit of a disappointing team. And then, you have like, I don't know, I guess it's rough to bring this up because so many other things happen, but like a guy like Markelle Fultz, when the Huskies only won 6 games the entire year, still he was putting up, like, even his analytics and everything there, like, and his ability to shoot pull-ups, all that stuff looked great, but the people that were maybe like a little bit concerned about how that would translate to the NBA, it doesn't completely explain everything that happened with him, but it at least brings up the possible concern.
I don't know if we can 100% explain what happened to Markelle Fultz. His shot, his shoulder, the whole hiding behind, the whole 76ers, not commenting. And then he goes to Orlando. You don't hear the whole story. And it's like,
I still root for him. I think he has a chance to still be like a good NBA player. But yeah, it just seems like him being the first pick was, at this point, there are definitely guys you rather would have had at that pick.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and I hope for him too. I wish for him too some of the best. I just think that any chance of him becoming, or fulfilling that number one prophecy or that level of proficiency, is gone after so many years of bad development and hearing from the wrong people or the wrong sides, or whether it's your team or the actual NBA team, whatever advice they're feeding him, what happened. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to get the clear answer on what went wrong with Markelle Fultz, but it did set him back quite a bit. And you're right, he's finally getting into the point where he can play effective in the NBA. We're hoping that it gets to the point where he can become a good point guard in the NBA, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It's still kind of iffy at this point in time. He is getting the starting nod, as the season came to a crashing end. He was the starting point guard for Orlando, so at least he's going to get the opportunity at best.
And then, eventually maybe you could see him being like a really good role guy somewhere as well. So, yeah, a lot of it is about – I was just thinking today, like, if Oscar Robertson and Jerry West had their team built like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had early in their career, like maybe we'd be thinking about them a little bit differently. Because right now, both of them are like pretty much – consistently at least left out of the top 10 players of all time, whereas you can't really take away what Magic, Larry, and Michael did, but with Jerry West and Oscar Robertson, they just have like the one championship year for both of them, and they're still considered like greats, but maybe not like that same level.
You take away some of the players, maybe one or two players on Boston Celtics to put them on
give them to the Lakers.
Yeah, that could have made all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you never know. But I still think the logo, still a great player. Oscar Robertson, just truly a tremendous player. And I agree with you. It's sad that they're not thought of in that context, because we're seeing all these debates right now with Jordan versus the entire world when it comes to after what happened with The Last Dance. Okay, is he better than Shaq? Is he better than Kobe? Is he better than this? Or is he better than that? Who's better than Jordan? You're hearing all that debate come up right now, and you're not even hearing a whisper out of Oscar Robertson or Jerry West, which is kind of sad because they truly made their mark in the NBA. But yeah, they ended up not winning the titles because, like you said, they were in the middle of a Boston dynasty at that point in time.
Yeah, and it comes down to when we're looking at players for the draft, we want the guy that is going to help them win as many games as possible, and that's what it comes down to. That's what analytics is trying to get to the bottom of, is trying to make a winning team,
and that's what it's all about. It's just awesome to talk to you as always. I learned so much more when I'm speaking to you, the Barlows at Stone Hansen. Just get so much more educated on the NBA draft and the process in it of itself. It is Michael Visenberg. You got to go ahead and check him out today at the Stepien. His work there, Perspective Insight, which is more geared towards the professionals and things of that nature. But they sometimes show videos on there that he works on, and also he is a mad retweeter. So you got to go ahead and follow him on Twitter at NBA Draft Mikey V, because he retweets and also tweets himself some great stuff on the NBA draft. And if you are an NBA draft, I won't pardon the phrase, the Barlows, but if you're an NBA draft junkie, that is the place to follow right there for you. I mean, because you gain so much more access on what people are talking about when it comes to the NBA draft by just following Mike at NBA Draft Mikey V. So I tell you what, it's just just learning your Twitter handle and seeing the things that you see on a daily basis is truly inspirational for NBA draft followers like me.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for having me on. It's always great chatting with you. You have some great insight as well, and some really good questions. And it's certainly. The only thing certain at this time is the amount of uncertainty. Yes. And we'll see how the draft ends up stacking up. But it's going to be a wild ride up until whenever we have the draft at this point, which is something that we're not used to saying.
Yeah, but we're hearing the whispers now. This time last month, we were not hearing any whispers on anything, so much uncertainty. Now we're hearing more whispers about when, not
Yeah.
if. It looks like it's going to be more and more reality. We're seeing more sports leagues. We're seeing NASCAR already saying, hey, we're going to do a schedule. Seeing more sports, hey, we're going to do a schedule. We're going to put that out there. So I think it's not a question of if, but when we're going to be seeing the NBA, to come back as far as finishing off whatever season's left, taking care of the playoffs, and then going into one of the best parts of the NBA calendar. Rubbing my hands when I say this, the NBA draft. I mean, when you watch the NBA draft, do you just got is that almost like your Christmas?
It is. It's a wonderful day. I love the draft. I love the whole process of it, and then actually seeing what happens. Then you have a whole new cycle and a whole year of following these guys to see what happens once they make it to the NBA.
One of these days, my friend, I'm going to ask you, the Barlows, and also as well Stone Hansen, down the road, obviously when things get better and coronavirus is something in the past, to come down to a Las Vegas casino, go to the Mirage, or any other casino, and watch the draft there and listen to all the fans. Because I've been through a couple drafts, I've seen all the drafts at home, but I've been to a couple in the casinos, and to me, that's an experience unlike I've ever seen. Yeah. It's almost like, it's actually better to me than going to the actual NBA draft itself in New Jersey, because you get the sprinkle of fans over there, but they're not as vocal unless they're Brooklyn or New York or whatnot. Here in Las Vegas, it's they're from all over, and they will just shout and curse and get mad and get angry and get happy, and they'll high five, and the whole gambit of emotion is great to see. I'll see popcorn flying and beers just like going all over the place if somebody gets drafted that they don't want. And Porzingis, I remember I was there for the Porzingis draft. Oh my gosh, the New York Knicks fan. Do you think the New York Knicks fans were upset in Secaucus when they did it, or MSG when they did it? They were mad as heck in the Mirage. People were just like, who the blankety blank is Porzingis? Oh my gosh.
That was what it was. It's so funny because you get these people that I had this video when I was growing up, and it was Dan Marley when he was drafted by Cleveland, and people were booing him like, who the hell is this guy? Everything, and the GM at the time was just like, you're gonna be sorry that you booed him. Like, he's a good player. Absolutely. And that does sound like a blast though.
It is. One of these days, I gotta suggest it to you because it's a lot of fun. Just like I said, it's just because you get to see it on all the big screens there, and you just see the reactions, and it's incredible to see. So only in Vegas. That's all I can say.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I'll tell you what, Michael, it's just been great talking to you. I cannot thank you enough for spending some more time with me. I'm looking forward to more conversations with you as it gets closer to a possible solidification of the NBA draft date, which is now looking more and more like sometime in August or September, which is good because you have certain times now that are being talked about, which means that we could be getting closer to an NBA season, which could mean we could be getting closer to an NBA draft, which is for you and I just a truly great experience every year. And again, I just appreciate all your insight right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.